Hello everyone, this is Minimoustachio, and this is a bit of a... This video applies to everyone. If you're new to the game, if you've been in the game for a long time, this applies to you. This is how a good way to know how you're going to mod your weapons. Any weapon, it applies to everything. So, this is the Barza. It's the new gun. I like it. Pretty good gun. But how do you go about modding it? And this does apply to every other weapon. So the first thing you do is you have to look at the weapon. You look at the weapon, you look at its stats, and decide which build you're going to go from first. So for instance, the first one we notice, it has a 26% crit chance, which means this is a crit weapon. We can do a crit build with this. Has a 2.8 multiplier, that's good. Status chance is only 10%, which is not good, so we don't do a status build. Now, when you mod weapons, doesn't matter what type of weapon, some things always stay the same. This is damage mods and multi-shot mods. Damage mods, it's free damage. You have to use it. Multi-shot just means that you're going to fire extra bullets occasionally, which is free damage. So, you match the polarities to half the cost. As you can see, the damage has gone up. So, a note of how the damage works. Add these numbers together, and that is the total damage of your weapon. The majority number, in this case puncture, means that if you proc status, which we have an 18% chance to do, that we will currently proc one of these three. Each one does something different. Because puncture's the highest number, odds are we'll proc that. But we can still proc the others. So, since this is crit, we're going to use Point Strike for crit chance, which now this goes up to a 65% crit chance. Vital Sense for crit damage, which puts the multiplier up to 6.2. Now, I haven't formed this weapon enough to fully finish the build on this, but one thing that this goes for every weapon. You have to put elements on them. You have to. Because we can see here the damage 28, 33, 17. But if I add infected clip 28, 33, 17, 71, we have gained a free 71 damage. Okay? So this damage that we have gained from Toxin that wasn't previously there is free damage, which is why you have to always use elements. We can add another element, get more damage, but when you combine two elements, it makes a single element, a better element. Same thing goes for even this crappy secondary weapon. Crit chance 2.5%. So that means no crit build because the chance is rubbish. 15% status. Still not very good. So, you just do a damage build, which Hornet Strike for damage. Barrel Deficient for multi-shot. Lethal Torrent for more multi-shot. Now, multi-shot does bring up status chance, that's fine. But one thing to note is that if you're using something that increases status chance, for instance, dual stat mod, it does it off its original value. It doesn't do it off of the value with multi-shot. So this would go from 36 to 53, which isn't that bad actually. Then it goes to 67, and then 78. That would go higher if I had the last one, but I don't. Melee weapons are also the same. Now, for melee weapons, you have your stance slot. The primary and secondary don't have it. So, you match the polarity. In this case, it's the V. As you can see, we have gained an extra 10 mod slots. Now, Same thing also applies to melee weapons. Damage. Now, we can't do multi-shot because that's not a thing for melee. Now, because this is a whip and whips have good range, we would use primed reach to increase the range. Attack speed. That's really handy on melee weapons. We would use this. Now, crit chance is 25. 1.5 multiplier. 20% status. So, for melee weapons, if you can use Blood Rush body count, which is this mod here and this mod here, then obviously you should do it because that is an amazing combo. Now, if you don't have that, you could easily just use Organ Shatter, which is crit damage, which we will use this as well. But in this case, you just wouldn't have Blood Rush or body count. So Organ Shatter and True Steel, which is crit chance and crit damage. It's just self-explanatory. Now, if we pick a random weapon, let's say the Flux Rifle. So as we can see, 2% crit chance, so it's not a crit weapon. 25% status a second, which means we go for status on this weapon. Now, we still follow the same rule. Damage. Multi-shot. Now, obviously I can't place any more mods on this, but even if you think your weapon is doing great and, you know, it's overperforming or whatever it might be doing, always add elements. It doesn't matter how strong your weapon is. For instance, if we go to the Tigris Prime, which is, in my opinion, one of the strongest weapons in the game. Let me just unequip Sweeper Prime. As we can see here, 2% crit chance. Sorry, 10% crit chance, 2 multiplier. So it's not a crit weapon. Status is 30%, which means this is definitely a status weapon. Now, the final build I ended up using came to 13,000 viral damage, 20,000 radiation damage, 19,000 slash, 1,000 impact and puncture. Now, I could have easily not used the dual stat mods and, let's say, just stacked slash damage. I'd have used Sweeping Serration to get a large bonus to slash. So when this weapon procs status, which it will do on every pellet, so it will proc it'll proc everything at once, essentially, if you hit it. If it doesn't kill the enemy, which it most likely will, it will proc all of these at once, because it's proccing on each pellet and shotguns shoot lots of pellets. Now, on some weapons, you have maybe the damage is it's one of these damage that is good enough that you can put a mod to increase it. For in this case, bore. Some weapons, the damage isn't good enough, where using a mod that increases just a single stat is really worth it. It's got a high stat. For instance, if I remove this, it becomes 2,400. That's with the Maxed Hornet Strike and both multi-shot. Then it's fine. But you have to take all of these things into account when modding. This is, of course, if you want to have, you know, the most DPS, all this. Because, sure, you could just not use elements. But if you're not using elements, you are really missing out on free damage. Because otherwise, you're just adding the damage, what you've already got, instead of getting free damage. Now, if you happen to get, let's say, Primed Heated Charge, or, go to the top of the list, a Riven mod, which is a salty reward. If you get if you get primed heated charge, which if you max that mod, it has 165% heat damage. Now, sometimes heat may not be the best element to use, but because primed heated charge is 165%, you have to use it. Now, doesn't matter who you're fighting or what you're fighting, you have to use this mod if you have it, because a normal element mod, let's take pathogen rounds for example, is 90% when maxed. Now, two 90% would be 180% element damage, which would give you a good boost of damage that you didn't have. However, you're getting 165% boost from one mod, which is close to what you could get with two mods. So hopefully you see why this mod is a must. The same goes for, I think it's primed cryo rounds and primed fever strike for primaries and melee. It's the same rule that follows. Use the max primed mod if you have it available, as it's almost as good as two. The same goes for a Riven mod. As we can see, I have plus electricity and heat. Now, while that doesn't go up to 90%, I'm getting two elements in one slot instead of two, which is a huge bonus. While yes, they make one overall element, I'm still getting the benefit of two instead of one. Now, that is essentially all it takes to mod weapons. There isn't much to it, to be honest. It's not as complicated as modding Warframes. You just look at these stats, look at all of them, decide how you're going to mod it based off of knowing those stats, and you can change it at a later date. You can test it. Maybe the element you chose wasn't good enough, swap it out for another one. Maybe you placed bore or sweeping serration on your weapon, and it just wasn't doing it. It wasn't the damage increase wasn't that good. Swap it out. Try something new. There's no right or wrong way to mod your weapon. Just as long as you follow the simple rule. Look at this. Add multi-shot. Add your regular damage. And always add elements. I hope this helps anyone who maybe struggles a little bit with modding their weapons. Maybe you're a veteran who just didn't understand properly. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see everyone in the next video.